A loving wife found dead in her own bathroom. Was it a tragic accident or a carefully staged murder? Stay with us until the end, because the truth about Stacy Feldman's death will shock you. The anniversary gathering. The Feldman home glowed with warm lights on a cool autumn evening. Family and friends gathered to celebrate Stacy Feldman's 15th wedding anniversary with her husband, Eric. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Laughter filled the air, glasses clinked, and the couple's 2 children played in the garden. But beneath the cheerful surface, cracks were already forming. Stacy, a woman in her mid-40s with a kind smile and compassionate heart, had always been the anchor of her family. She worked part-time at a local charity, loved helping neighbors, and was known for her loyalty. Yet those closest to her sensed she carried a heavy burden. That evening, Stacy's sister Megan Collins noticed her eyes looked tired, her smile forced. Megan asked quietly, "You okay?" Stacy brushed it off, whispering, "I'll tell you later." Eric, her husband, seemed distracted. He laughed a little too loudly, his eyes shifting around the room as if searching for someone. When Stacy stepped outside for air, Eric disappeared into the kitchen, where a young woman was waiting. Vanessa Moore, an event planner who had been working closely with the couple. Their quiet conversation seemed harmless to most, but Megan caught the subtle touches and stolen glances. The party went on late into the night, but when guests finally left, tension filled the air. Stacy confronted Eric in their bedroom. She accused him of having an affair. Eric denied it, but his face betrayed him. "You're imagining things, Stacy. Stop embarrassing yourself," he said coldly. The next morning, Stacy confided in Megan over the phone. "If anything ever happens to me, don't let it go. Promise me." Megan laughed nervously, thinking Stacy was exaggerating. But Stacy's voice was firm. "Promise me." 2 days later, neighbors saw police cars racing toward the Feldman house. Stacy had been found unresponsive in the bathroom. Eric claimed she had slipped, hit her head, and drowned in the tub. The news shook the community. Everyone believed it was a tragic accident. Everyone, except Megan. She remembered Stacy's warning, and so began the investigation into what really happened the night Stacy Feldman died, and whether her death was carefully staged. The suspicious accident, the morning Stacy Feldman was found dead, began like any other in the quiet suburban neighborhood. The Feldman home, a neat 2-story with white shutters and a small rose garden, was suddenly swarmed with flashing police cars and an ambulance. Neighbors peeked through curtains, whispering and speculating as paramedics wheeled out a covered stretcher. Inside the house, Eric Feldman stood with arms folded, his face pale but strangely calm. He told first responders that his wife had slipped in the bathtub. According to him, Stacy had been taking a long shower while he prepared breakfast for their kids. When she didn't come downstairs, he went to check and found her unconscious in the tub. He said he tried CPR but couldn't revive her. At first glance, the story sounded believable. Accidents happen every day. Bathrooms can be dangerous places, and a slip could prove fatal. But to Detective Daniel Harper, something about the scene felt off. Detective Harper was a seasoned investigator, with nearly 3 decades of experience. He had seen staged scenes before, husbands disguising crimes as burglaries, wives covering up poisonings as food poisoning, families weaving lies that crumbled under pressure. His instincts told him to look closer. When he stepped into the bathroom, he noticed little details that didn't match Eric's account. The floor was oddly dry, with no puddles of water one might expect after a fall in the tub. Stacy's hair was damp but not soaking wet. Even the tub itself looked suspiciously clean, as though it had been wiped down. "Mr. Feldman," Harper asked carefully, "when exactly did you find your wife?" Eric sighed, running a hand over his face. "Just 10 minutes before I called. I tried to help her, but it was too late." The detective's eyes narrowed. 10 minutes was a long time to wait before calling for help, especially for someone claiming to panic. Meanwhile, Megan Collins arrived at the house after receiving Eric's frantic call. She rushed past the yellow tape, her face streaked with tears, demanding to know what had happened. When Eric repeated his story, Megan stared at him with disbelief. "She told me something like this might happen," Megan whispered to Detective Harper when Eric stepped away. She was scared. She thought Eric was hiding something. That was the first seed of doubt. Later that evening, Harper visited the coroner's office to hear preliminary results. The autopsy report was troubling. Stacy had bruising on her arms, bruises that didn't look accidental. There were also signs of pressure around her neck, faint but visible under close examination. While drowning was listed as a possible cause of death, the medical examiner couldn't ignore the evidence suggesting Stacy may have been forcibly held down. When Harper shared this with Megan, she broke down. "I knew it," she said. "Eric wanted her gone. He has a woman. I saw them together at the party." The mention of another woman gave Harper more direction. He began digging into Eric's phone records and financial statements. That's when Vanessa Moore's name surfaced again. She and Eric had exchanged dozens of late-night messages, often deleting them immediately after. Bank records showed Eric had recently withdrawn large sums of money, cash that seemed to vanish without explanation. Harper realized he was dealing with more than an accident. If Stacy's death was staged, the motive could very well be tied to infidelity, and perhaps money. But proving it would be another matter. The following week, the funeral was held. Friends and family gathered at the small chapel, mourning Stacy's sudden death. Eric played the grieving widower, delivering a eulogy about his beloved wife and tragic loss. He wiped his eyes dramatically, his voice breaking at rehearsed moments. But Megan, sitting in the front pew, clenched her fists in rage. She saw through the performance. After the service, Detective Harper watched Eric carefully. Instead of mingling with family, Eric lingered near Vanessa Moore, who had slipped quietly into the back of the chapel. Their eyes met, and for just a moment Harper saw it, the intimacy they thought no one noticed. To the world, Stacy Feldman's death looked like a household tragedy. To Harper, it was the beginning of a murder case. And to Megan, it was personal. She had promised her sister she wouldn't let her down, and she wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. Cracks in the alibi. Detective Daniel Harper knew the key to solving a case like Stacy Feldman's was patience. Staged deaths required careful unraveling, layer by layer, lie by lie. And Eric Feldman's story was already starting to crack. Eric told police he had been downstairs preparing breakfast for the kids when Stacy slipped in the bathroom. But when Harper interviewed the children, their answers didn't line up. The daughter, Lily Feldman, only 10 years old, mentioned something odd. "Daddy was upstairs for a long time," she said softly, playing with the hem of her dress. "I heard them talking, kind of yelling. Then it got really quiet." Harper leaned forward. "Do you remember what time that was?" "Before breakfast. I was watching cartoons." The boy, Ethan, only 7, added innocently, "Daddy told us not to go upstairs. He said Mommy was sick." That was the first direct contradiction. Eric had said he was downstairs the whole time, but his kids painted a very different picture. The investigation widened. Harper subpoenaed Eric's phone records. On the morning of Stacy's death, Eric had made 2 calls. One was to 911. The other, surprisingly, was to Vanessa Moore, just 15 minutes before dialing emergency services. It raised an alarming question. Why would a husband call his mistress right before calling for help for his wife? Vanessa was brought in for questioning. Sitting across the table, her blonde hair tucked neatly behind her ears, she looked nervous but composed. "We're just friends," she insisted. "Eric and I work together, that's all." Harper slid the phone records across the table. Friends don't exchange over 300 text messages in 1 month. And they don't talk minutes before his wife is found dead. Her face flushed. She fidgeted. "Okay, we were close, but I had nothing to do with this, I swear." Harper leaned back. He believed her, at least partly. Vanessa may not have been directly involved, but she was the motive Eric needed. Meanwhile, Megan Collins took matters into her own hands. She went through Stacy's belongings, hoping to find something useful. In the back of Stacy's closet, hidden in a small box, she found a folded letter written in Stacy's handwriting. It was a diary entry of sorts, written weeks before her death. Eric thinks I don't know about Vanessa. I do. I see the way he looks at her. I've tried to confront him, but he denies it. I don't feel safe anymore. Sometimes I wonder if he wishes me gone. If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident. Megan's hand shook as she read it. It was chilling proof that Stacy had predicted her own death. She immediately gave the note to Detective Harper. For him, it was the missing puzzle piece. Stacy's fear wasn't paranoia. It was foresight. Eric, however, continued to maintain his innocence. He played the role of the grieving husband, wearing black, speaking softly, and attending every police interview with rehearsed composure. But Harper noticed how carefully Eric controlled his answers. Never too emotional, never too detached, just enough to appear sympathetic. Still, evidence was piling up. The autopsy revealed bruises inconsistent with a fall. The timeline suggested Eric delayed calling. 911 phone records tied him to Vanessa at a critical moment. Stacy's own words pointed toward foul play. It was enough to push the case forward, but Harper needed something stronger, something undeniable. One evening, Harper returned to the Feldman house for a follow-up walkthrough. As he retraced the steps of that morning, he noticed a faint scratch on the bathroom doorframe. Closer inspection revealed what looked like broken fingernail fragments lodged in the wood. The coroner confirmed later that Stacy had broken 2 nails around the time of death. To Harper, the message was clear. She had fought back. Eric's story was unraveling. What he had staged as an accident was now screaming murder. But Eric wasn't the only one under pressure. Vanessa Moore, once confident in her secret romance, now felt the walls closing in. Her friends began whispering. Her reputation was crumbling, and police attention made her fear for her own freedom. Late one night, she called Detective Harper. "There's something you don't know," she whispered. "Eric told me. If Stacy wasn't around, we could finally be together. He said he had a plan." Harper froze. This was the confession he'd been waiting for. Not from Eric's mouth, but from the person he trusted most. Still, Harper knew Eric was cunning. Arresting him too soon might allow him to slip away. He needed to tighten the net. Catch Eric in a lie so big it couldn't be undone. And Megan, still grieving, was willing to help. The stage was set for Eric Feldman to finally reveal his true face, and when he did, it would shock everyone. Trapping the liar detective Daniel Harper knew that a case like this required more than just suspicion. It needed irrefutable proof. Eric Feldman was too careful, too rehearsed. He wouldn't confess easily. But Harper also knew one thing about liars. Eventually, they slip. And with Megan Collins's determination, Harper had an ally who wasn't afraid to push Eric's buttons. The tension builds a week after Stacy's funeral. Megan invited Eric to lunch under the guise of clearing the air. She wanted him to believe she was finally letting go of her suspicions. Eric agreed, arriving in his usual polished attire, a crisp shirt, tailored blazer, and that same calm, almost smug demeanor. Over salads at a quiet cafe, Megan spoke carefully. "You know, Eric, I'm trying to accept that Stacy's death was an accident, but some things don't add up." Eric froze for a second, then smiled thinly. "Megan, grief makes us see patterns that aren't there. Stacy was fragile, emotional. She probably slipped." Megan leaned in. "She wasn't fragile. She was scared. She told me if anything happened to her, it wouldn't be an accident." Eric's jaw tightened. He quickly changed the subject, but Megan noticed how his hand trembled slightly when lifting his glass. Hidden in Megan's purse was a small recording device Detective Harper had provided. Every word, every pause, every slip was being captured. The financial motive. Meanwhile, Harper dug deeper into Eric's finances. What he found was shocking. Just weeks before Stacy's death, Eric had taken out a life insurance policy worth $750,000, naming himself as the sole beneficiary. The policy had been rushed through, with signatures dated only 2 months earlier. When Harper cross-checked, he learned Stacy hadn't even been fully aware of the policy. Eric had handled all the paperwork, insisting she just sign quickly. It was the smoking gun Harper needed. Motive. Stacy's death wasn't about rage or impulse. It was about money and freedom. The Mistress Speaks Vanessa Moore, still rattled by police attention, finally broke. In another interview, she admitted more details. Eric said he was stuck in his marriage. He told me Stacy was depressed, that she didn't care about living anymore. Then one night he said he might help fade along. I thought he was joking, but the morning she died, he called me. He said, "It's done." Her words chilled Harper. Eric had staged the death not only as an accident, but as if Stacy had somehow wanted it. But the bruises, the letter, the scratches on the bathroom door, they all told a different story. Setting the trap, Harper knew he couldn't confront Eric directly yet. He needed Eric to incriminate himself in his own words. That's where Megan came in again. With Harper's guidance, Megan met Eric a second time, this time at the Feldman house. They sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. Megan pretended to waver. "Eric, I just want the truth. If something happened with Stacy, if you lost control, I can keep it between us. But I need to know." Eric sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Megan, you don't understand. Stacy was impossible. She threatened to take the kids to ruin me. She left me no choice." Megan's heart pounded. "No choice? What do you mean?" Eric hesitated, then lowered his voice. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. I just held her down until she stopped fighting. It was quick, peaceful almost." Megan's face went cold. She had just heard Eric confess to murdering her sister, and hidden in the room, Harper's surveillance team recorded every word through a wire Megan wore under her sweater. The arrest 2 days later, Eric Feldman was arrested at his office. His colleagues watched in shock as uniformed officers led him out in handcuffs. The man who had played the grieving widower was now facing charges of first-degree murder. At the police station, Harper confronted him with the evidence. The bruises inconsistent with a fall, the delayed 911 call, the life insurance policy, Vanessa's testimony, Stacy's warning letter, and most damning of all, his recorded confession to Megan. Eric's mask finally cracked. He dropped his calm facade, slamming his fists on the table. "She was going to destroy me. Take everything from me. I couldn't let that happen." His outburst sealed the case. The family's grief for Megan, it was bittersweet. She had kept her promise to Stacy. She didn't let her sister's death be swept aside as an accident. But it came at the cost of shattering her family. Stacy's children, Lily and Ethan, would now grow up without either parent. Their mother dead, their father in prison. At night, Megan replayed Eric's words in her head. She had looked her brother-in-law in the eye, given him a chance to confess, and he had. The memory haunted her but also gave her strength. Stacy's voice, her warning, had not been ignored. The truth was finally out, but the trial ahead would reveal even more shocking details about how far Eric Feldman had gone to stage the perfect crime. Justice in the courtroom was packed. Journalists filled the benches. Neighbors leaned forward with curiosity, and family members clutched tissues as Eric Feldman was led in, wearing a dark suit and handcuffs. Gone was the polished widower who once charmed his community. In his place stood a man accused of murdering his own wife. The charge was clear. First-degree murder. The evidence was strong, but trials were unpredictable. All Eric needed was one juror to doubt. The prosecution's case. The state presented its case piece by piece, laying bare the lies Eric had told. The prosecutor began with Stacy's warning letter, reading it aloud. "If anything happens to me, it won't be an accident." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. It was as if Stacy herself had returned to testify against her husband. Next came the forensic evidence. Photos of bruises on Stacy's arms and faint marks around her neck were displayed on large screens. The medical examiner explained calmly, "These are not injuries from a fall. These are injuries from restraint." Stacy Feldman fought for her life. Then came the children's testimony. Lily and Ethan were too young to take the stand, but their statements were presented. Jurors listened to the recordings of their innocent voices. "Daddy told us not to go upstairs. He said Mommy was sick." The room grew quiet. Jurors shifted uncomfortably. For many, that was the turning point. The children's words cutting through the lies. And then Vanessa Moore was called. Nervous but resolute, she admitted her affair with Eric. She testified about the late-night calls, the secret meetings, and the chilling words Eric told her. If Stacy wasn't around, we could finally be together. Finally, the prosecution unveiled the life insurance policy, signed only 2 months before Stacy's death, worth $750,000, and with Eric as the sole beneficiary. The motive was as clear as the method. The defense struggles. Eric's lawyers argued that Stacy was depressed, that she could have slipped, that bruises might have come from something else. They painted Vanessa as a scorned woman twisting the truth to protect herself. But the defense faltered when the prosecution played the recording. In the jury's silence, Eric's own voice filled the room. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. I just held her down until she stopped fighting." Eric buried his face in his hands. Some jurors turned away. Others shook their heads in disbelief. There was no coming back from those words. Megan's testimony. When Megan Collins took the stand, the courtroom held its breath. She spoke with a calm strength even as tears rolled down her cheeks. "My sister trusted me with her last fear. She told me, if anything happens, don't let it go. I promised her. That's why I'm here." Stacy's voice deserves to be heard. Her words echoed, powerful and unshakable. For jurors, it was more than testimony. It was the voice of loyalty, of truth, of family refusing to be silenced. The verdict. After days of testimony and hours of deliberation, the jury returned. The judge asked for the decision. On the charge of first-degree murder, they found Eric Feldman guilty. A wave of relief swept through the courtroom. Megan wept, clutching Stacy's photo in her hands. Eric sat motionless, his face drained of all arrogance. He would spend the rest of his life behind bars. The aftermath. The media swarmed the case. Headlines read, "Staged death uncovered. Husband convicted of murdering wife." True crime shows replayed the story, dissecting every detail. But for those closest to Stacy, it wasn't about headlines. It was about healing. Megan took guardianship of Lily and Ethan. The children, though scarred, began to rebuild their lives with her support. She kept Stacy's memory alive, sharing stories, showing photos, reminding them of the love their mother carried. Detective Harper moved on to his next case, but Stacy Feldman's death remained etched in his mind. It was a reminder, he later told a colleague, that sometimes the perfect crime is only perfect until someone keeps asking questions. A promise. Kept on the 1-year anniversary of Stacy's death, Megan visited her grave. She placed fresh roses on the headstone and whispered, "I kept my promise. Stacy, they'll never call it an accident again." The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the weight of justice finally served. The staged death of Stacy Feldman had become one of the most haunting true crime stories in the community, proof that lies can be masked as tragedy, but truth always finds a way to break through.